All right, so get this, okay. Two massive snowstorms, right? One walloped Buffalo, New York. I mean, Buffalo,
Yeah.
practically invented blizzards,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, for sure.
The other one slammed Texas, where snow is like, well, let's just say it's not exactly an everyday thing.
Right, right. Not exactly snow country.
So, pop quiz.
Hmm.
Which storm do you think was the deadliest?
Mm. Well, Buffalo's got, like, snow removal down to a science. I'm
Yeah.
betting on the Texas storm catching folks off guard.
You would think, wouldn't you? But here's where it gets kind of crazy. The 2021 Texas storm, 246 lives lost. Shocking, right?
Wow, that's a lot.
Now, the 2022 Buffalo blizzard, way more snow, but only 39 fatalities.
Wait, hold on a sec. You're saying the place that practically lives and breathes snow had fewer deaths.
Yep.
There's got to be more to it than just, how much snow fell.
Exactly. That's what we're diving into today. We've got reports, articles, even some historical stuff to really unpack this whole thing.
I'm intrigued already.
Because think about it, right? Snow warnings. They're not just weather forecasts. They're like a giant societal stress test. Everything gets put under the microscope, from the roads and bridges to how people react when things get icy.
So it's not just about predicting the storm, but predicting human behavior, too.
Bingo. And that's where things get really interesting. So let's start with the warnings themselves, okay? Imagine them like, I don't know, a high-stakes gamble, right? You're not just predicting the weather, you're predicting how people are going to act. But here's the thing. Warnings are all about probability. And people.
Yeah.
People need to know what to do, right? They need concrete actions. A warning that says 80% chance of heavy snow, well, that can mean a lot of different things to different people.
Very true. I might hear that and think, okay, time to stock up on snacks and movies. But someone else might hear that and think, gotta get to work no matter what. And that's where things can go wrong.
Right. And then you've got situations like, well, take Fargo, North Dakota back in 2021. Fargo, they're no strangers to snow. Right. But this one storm, it barreled in faster than anyone expected. And because radar coverage is kind of sparse out there, the warning came 3 hours late. People were totally caught off guard.
So geography plays a role, too.
Big time.
Dense cities like Chicago, they've got radar everywhere, so they get super accurate warnings, plenty of time to react. But more rural areas, they're at the mercy of less precise data, and that means more uncertainty.
It's like a hidden disadvantage.
Absolutely.
Just based on where you live.
Yeah.
But even with perfect accuracy, the human factor can throw everything off. Take Chicago again, for example. A snow warning there triggers a whole chain reaction. Salt trucks hit the streets, schools close, the whole 9 yards.
Yeah.
But people still filter those warnings through their own experiences. Maybe they remember a snowmageddon that was a total dud, all hype, no snow.
So they think, the weatherman's being dramatic again, and they just go about their day.
Yep, they downplay the risk.
Even with all the sirens blaring.
And that's what it all boils down to. Warnings hinge on trust. Trust in the technology, trust in the folks issuing the warnings, and even trust in the collective memory of past storms.
So even with the most advanced forecasting system in the world, if people don't trust the message, the warning fails.
It's a disconnect between, like, the science and the human experience, because hearing chance of snow is one thing.
Yeah.
But deciding whether to risk driving your kid to school in a blizzard,
That's a whole different story.
that's where the rubber meets the road.
Yeah, and this whole idea of trust and warnings. Well, it hasn't always been, super sophisticated. Like, imagine getting your weather info from some vague radio broadcast. Expect some weather, maybe some snow. A far cry from the detailed alerts we're used to now.
Right. It's been a whole evolution from, like, educated guesswork to data-driven predictions.
Exactly.
But it took some serious wake-up calls to get us here. Like in 1888, remember that one? The Great Blizzard?
Oh, yeah.
Slammed the Northeast. New York City got buried under, get this, 50 inches of snow. 50 inches. Streets were impassable. The whole city just shut down. It was, well, chaos is an understatement.
Talk about a reality check. Back then, forecasts were basically like someone looking out the window and making a guess. Often, they didn't even know a storm had hit until it was already over.
Yeah.
That blizzard just exposed how fragile cities could be when the snow really started coming down.
But out of that chaos, something interesting happened. The city realized they couldn't keep relying on horse-drawn carriages and above-ground transportation if they wanted to, survive a major blizzard.
Yeah.
So what did they do?
Well, they started building the subway, didn't they?
They did. The Great Blizzard, as destructive as it was forced New York to rethink its entire infrastructure.
It's fascinating, isn't it, how these extreme events can actually drive progress?
It's like nature throws you a curveball and you got to invent a whole new game to catch it. And those innovations kept coming. Remember the 1940 Armistice Day blizzard? Tragic, of course.
Yes.
But it totally revolutionized how we predict the weather.
Right. They realized they needed more than just, surface observations. And then came radar technology. Suddenly, we could actually see inside storms, track their every move, anticipate how intense they were going to be. Forecasting went from maybe snow to expect heavy snow in this specific area at this specific time.
Total game changer.
Absolutely.
But even with all this amazing tech, we still see cases where warnings just don't translate to action. Take the 2022 Buffalo blizzard, for example. They had warnings of historic snowfall, but tons of people still hit the roads.
Yeah.
39 lives lost. And it wasn't because the forecast was wrong.
It's that human element again, isn't it? Even in a place known for being, well, snow savvy, there's this tendency to downplay the risk. Maybe they thought, I've seen worse or I can handle it. But this time, the storm was different.
It really was. So even experience has its limits. And sometimes those warnings we've been talking about, they reveal deeper problems that go way beyond just the weather itself.
Exactly. Let's look at the 2021 Texas storm, for example. Texas, it's not exactly known for brutal winters, right?
Right.
But this freeze, it was historic. Warnings went out, of course, but what happened next was a cascade of failures. It exposed just how fragile the whole system was.
The power grid, which wasn't built for that kind of extreme cold, just went kaput. Millions of people plunged into darkness. Pipes froze. Water treatment plants shut down. The human cost was, well, it was devastating.
It was. And it's a stark contrast to how Buffalo, a city built for snow, dealt with its blizzard.
Right.
And here's the thing. Texas had faced serious freezes before, 1989, 2011, and each time, experts warned them, hey, you need to winterize your power grid. But those warnings were largely ignored.
Because short-term thinking often wins out over long-term preparedness. It's like they just crossed their fingers and hoped it wouldn't happen again. And this time, they lost. Big time.
It's like a classic case of warnings issued, lessons forgotten. And it's not just Texas either. The UK got hit with a similar wake-up call back in 2018 with the Beast from the East.
Oh, yeah, I remember that one.
This Arctic blast just froze the country, even though there were warnings. Transportation shut down. Essential services were crippled.
Well, because they weren't prepared for a truly extreme winter event. It makes you think, if places that rarely see snow can get caught off guard like that, what happens when a major blizzard hits a region that thinks it's ready?
That's a great question. And it brings us back to Buffalo. Even with their, snow-savvy culture, the 2022 blizzard revealed some vulnerabilities. Emergency resources were stretched thin, people were stranded. It showed that even the best prepared systems have their breaking points.
It's like no matter how much you prepare, nature can always find a way to throw something new at you. And sometimes, those warnings we get, they're not just about the weather. They're about holding a mirror up to ourselves and asking, are we really as ready as we think we are? So it feels like we keep seeing this pattern, right? Warnings get issued, lessons are learned, and then, well, it's like we collectively forget. We're constantly playing catch up with these snowstorms, even with all our technology and experience. What's going on here?
I think it's because we tend to see snow warnings in isolation, like they're just about predicting the next blizzard.
Yeah.
But they're so much bigger than that. They reflect our priorities, our values, even our willingness to adapt to a world that's changing.
It's like the snow is holding up this mirror to society, showing us where we're strong and where we're vulnerable. And sometimes, let's be honest, that reflection isn't so pretty.
Exactly. We need to start thinking of snow warnings as part of this larger system, a system of risk management and adaptation. It's not just about surviving the next storm. It's about thriving in a world where extreme weather is becoming the new normal.
So how do we actually DO that? Where do we even begin?
Well, we got to address those vulnerabilities we've been talking about. Remember Fargo? The delayed warning because of that limited radar coverage. We need to invest in infrastructure, especially in those rural areas. Make sure everyone has access to accurate and timely information.
That makes sense. But infrastructure is expensive.
Yeah.
And it takes time to build. How do we convince people it's worth the investment, especially when those big blizzards don't happen every year?
We remind them that ignoring warnings has consequences. Look at Texas. They had all those warnings about their power grid, but chose to ignore them. Then 2021 hit, and the whole system just collapsed. Hundreds of lives lost, billions of dollars in damage. That's the price of short-term thinking.
Yeah, talk about a painful lesson.
Mhm.
But it's not just about buildings and technology, right? We
Mhm.
saw how communication breakdowns can be just as devastating, like in
Yeah.
Atlanta. So how do we make sure people actually understand these warnings and take them seriously?
We got to make the message really hit home. Instead of just saying, expect 12 inches of snow, we need to paint a picture of what that actually means. Roads will be impassable, schools will be closed, stock up on essential supplies.
So connect the dots between the forecast and the impact, right? Make it
Yeah.
real, make it personal.
Exactly. But even then, some people are still going to think, it's just snow, I can handle it.
Yeah.
And that's where trust comes back into play. We need clear, consistent messaging from sources that people trust. Could be their local meteorologists, community leaders, even their social media networks. It's about building a culture where heeding warnings is just second nature, like wearing a seatbelt.
So it's like a web, right? You've got accurate data, reliable infrastructure, clear communication, and then you empower individuals to actually take action. Each part strengthens the others.
Exactly. And it's a web that needs constant attention. We've got to learn from every storm, every success, every failure, and use that knowledge to make each strand stronger, more resilient.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, what's the one thing you want our listeners to walk away with today?
Think about it this way. Snowstorms, like so many challenges in life, they reveal who we are, both as individuals and as a society. They test our systems, our values, even our willingness to adapt. But by understanding those tests, by learning from them, we can build a more resilient future, a future that can weather any storm.
Beautifully said. And everyone listening, take a moment to think about what you've learned today. How prepared is your community for a major snowstorm? What steps can you take, big or small, to be ready for whatever winter throws your way? Because as we've seen, a little bit of preparation can make all the difference.